Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I'm Tim.
And I am Luke.
And Luke, we have reached kind of an interesting point in the NFL season. Thanksgiving, to me, has always kind of been that delineation, right? You're either planning for next year, you're firing your coaches, your fans hate you, or you're kind of making a run for it, or you've identified yourself as an elite football team, as the Eagles did on Monday night, apparently, by surviving against a Kansas City team who refused to score points and beat them. But yeah, Thanksgiving week it is. Any big Thanksgiving week plans? Are you a big feast cooker, or are you a go out to eat and eat Chinese food, pretend it's not a real holiday?
No, I mean, well, for me, it's not a real holiday, so I don't have that problem. It's one I've inherited, so it doesn't carry too much significance for me, apart from I get a day off, which is nice. No, usually we'll be hanging with other kind of non-Americans usually, because obviously all the Americans go and do, family stuff most of the time. So it'll be...
You're welcome to my family gathering any year, Luke.
I appreciate that, Tim. But maybe we should have talked about it before, 2 days before.
Indeed.
But yeah, no, just going out with a little Friendsgiving action. We have hosted before. We have had others before. We're going out to eat in the evening on Thursday with a couple of friends, so that'll be nice. And I am.
Is the menu at least turkey and dressing, or is the menu?
You know what? I didn't book it. I haven't even looked. I'm just going to show up.
You have no idea.
They have a Thanksgiving. You're going to show up to
some restaurant. Okay.
I'm assuming they'll have Thanksgiving food. I would hope. All I know is someone else sorted it out and said, "This is when it starts.
This is where we're eating. Be there."
And then Tim, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, just coastal elite virtue signaling here. But I am going to. I'm volunteering in the morning as well. I try and volunteer on Thanksgiving in the morning or early afternoon.
Good for you.
The last few years.
One day a year, you try to be a good person. I think that's good.
Yeah, Bowery Mission downtown New York. It's a homeless shelter. Dish out the food to the people who need it. So it's always a nice thing to do. Kind of gets you in the right mood. And the one thing I will say, Tim, about Thanksgiving, just from my perspective as someone who did grow up with it, is it's a nice yardstick, milestone, whatever you want to call it, between that's the Christmas season can then begin. Like in the UK, because you don't have anything. Halloween is sort of a thing, and then beyond that, it just starts to ramp up quite quickly. Whereas here, because you have Thanksgiving, it's like, well, I get a whole month of there's some Christmassy adverts, right? I've already started and whatnot, but you get a nice break, you get something else, you get an extra day off, you go have a big kind of practice, eat as much as you can day, which is good, get the reps in. And then Christmas begins, which is my favorite time of year. So it works very well. But
best time of year,
that to say,
no doubt.
No, don't have anything super exciting planned. I'm assuming you are, the Engels
got the family in town. I've thrown so my little behind the scenes info here. The studio doubles as my office, which doubles as our guest room here at the Engel abode. And so I've thrown my mother and her husband out of the studio for the
love of the game
here. So appreciate me.
Love of the
That's
game.
right. Appreciate them letting me encroach back on the space they're encroaching upon.
Thanks, Mother Engel.
But no, we'll a little small thing. Yeah, a little small thing for the family here local. And then we tend to do additional. We've got some family in the area, so we'll do some stuff on Friday and Saturday.
Nice.
With the broader clan. But
obviously
Luke,
we'll be there at midnight and all at the stores waiting to pounce on those bargains as well, Tim, for Black Friday. So of course that goes without saying.
I have to tell you, Luke, I actually was a big Black Friday shopper. So that was
really?
something me and my mom every year we would go Black Friday shopping. And so we would, we'd have Thanksgiving, we'd get up at the crack of dawn, and well before the crack of dawn, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, go wait in line outside of Circuit City somewhere.
A nightmare. That sounds like my nightmare.
Yeah, it was mine too, frankly, but it was something we did together and it was kind of fun. No more, because I will be sitting in my bed, half asleep, scrolling through Amazon to figure out what deals I have to acquire.
That's fair.
Because, of course, they will never be that price again. It might be a different price that could be lower or higher or 1 penny different. But, hey, Thanksgiving deals are the best deals.
Yeah.
Luke, I'm going to tell everybody they should probably check out our YouTube channel. They should probably check out their podcast app of choice. Search for the Half Yard Line Pod. You found us some way. So however you found us, like, favorite, subscribe. We're on a lot of other things too. So if you want to go find us again, you like another thing better, do that. We're on all the things. We're on all the social media too at Half Yard Line Pod. Check us out on all the social medias. If you like what we're doing, if you don't like what we're doing, you can check us out there and tell us that too.
It's big news for the listenership, Tim. We are back. We are now back active on Threads.
Whoa!
So we've been bringing that up.
Are we trolling Elon here?
We're so zeitgeisty.
That's right.
Yeah, so we're on Threads, we're on Twitter /X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube at Half Yard Line Pod across everything. And usually we talk about football.
halfyardlinepod@gmail.com.
Yeah, when we're not talking about Thanksgiving plans or sumptuous deals to be had outside middling electronic stores.
Failed electronic stores. I was managing a Circuit City when they failed. I don't think I had anything to do with it. But
when they failed.
Well, like 6 months before they failed, I left. Okay. Maybe that was the problem.
So it wasn't like Lehman Brothers where you were like carrying out like a desk
carrying
chair.
out TVs. Yeah. No. But I will say, let's get into the football for just a moment. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is the episode you've all been waiting for. This is the one I have been asked about by everybody I know. What do you think about fill in the blank hot thing? All right. Brock Purdy. What do you think about Brock Purdy? What do you think about Kenny Pickett? What do you think about DeVito, whatever his first name is? What do you think about
Tommy DeVito? Yeah.
Tommy, not Danny. I knew that, but I couldn't remember.
Not Danny DeVito. The character from Goodfellas, not the short Hollywood actor.
What do you think about rookie upstart CJ Stroud? What do you think about blah, 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 blah? Everybody wants to talk about the next hot thing, and that next hot thing is almost always a quarterback. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how the NFL thinks about quarterbacks, how the NFL press covers quarterbacks, and how frustrated that makes me as a football fan. I know you as a football fan, Luke, and I think probably lots of other football fans out there, if we're really honest. But before we get there, I have two quick hitters for you. Because today is a day of very big news.
That's huge.
Huge news. There's two things that happened earlier today, and we're going to take them in order of importance. The first, and I just have to hear your take on this, because to me, this is like Barack Obama coming back and shitting all over whoever's president at the time, is Tom Brady has come out and bemoaned the quality of NFL football. It is a lot of mediocrity, is the quote, a lot of mediocrity. And he says college no longer prepares players for the pros, as if that's what college job is. What say you about Tom Brady telling basically everyone else now that he is an old man shouting into the wind that it was so much better when he was a kid?
Yeah, I haven't seen the full rundown. This was on Stephen A. Smith's podcast, I think it was, or his show, something. It was the full interview. I didn't get time to catch it today just because I have a job, unfortunately. But I saw a clip of it where he talked. I know he talked about the kind of encroachment of rules that kind of prohibit certain kind of tackles. Defensive players are finding it very tough. He talked about when he played, or even before, you didn't throw across the middle, or you didn't throw in certain spots because Ray Lewis is going to hit you, or Ronnie Lott's going to hit you, and so on. Now, I will say, and actually the thing he said that I thought was the most salient of all those is he said, from his perspective, it's not the defensive player's job to protect the offensive player, which I thought was an interesting way to put it. I 100% agree with him on that point.
You are also an old man yelling into
I'm an old man in a younger man's body, not as young as it once was. But I do agree with him in terms of that thematic, right? Like the over encroachment of rules. Player safety is super important. Reducing concussions, very important. However, there is a physical component to the game. Roughing the passer is the easiest example in the world, right? They've introduced a billion rules. You can't hit them high. You can't hit them low. You can't brush the face mask with your hand.
Great Buffalo Wild Wings commercial.
Right, it's a great commercial. You can't land on the quarterback, and it's first of all, quarterbacks are still getting injured. We've had 10 rookie quarterbacks start this year, a lot of whom weren't planned to be starting games at all, and
something like 60 of them started last year, based on the stat you hit me with earlier this year.
Yeah, no, a lot of quarterbacks are still starting games. A lot of quarterbacks are still getting hurt. The reason is it's a game in which people have to tackle each other, and at full speed. When you see the replays, it looks a lot worse. When you see Aaron Donald bearing down on Geno Smith this weekend, right? Smashed into him, hit him in the throwing arm. Geno's out for a few series, kind of comes back in. He's questionable. Maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's not. Like at full speed, Aaron Donald's 300 pounds. He's sprinting as fast as he can. His job is hit the other guy.
He's fast.
And his other job is don't hit the guy in such a way to not hurt him, or not get flagged. Sorry. But
that's the key.
In not trying to get flagged, he's hitting his arm because he can. And it looks bad because he's hitting the one thing that he's allowed to hit. So I agree with Tom Brady on that. And I do think whilst legislating the kind of Kareem Jackson kind of stuff, right, who's just been suspended 4 games by the league again for just continually trying to kind of headshot guys. Headshotting should be illegal. Face masking should be illegal. Horse collars, they are dangerous, right? But we keep introducing more and more and more things, and the defensive player now bears the onus of responsibility more than the offensive player to protect himself, which I agree with Brady on. Now, of course, all retired players say it was better when they played.
Yep.
I will say Brady's picked a great time to do this because this is one of the most underwhelming NFL seasons we've had in quite a long time, right? If you're going to complain about football,
it's bad.
You picked a good year. You've had, as we mentioned, tons of rookie quarterbacks. It's low scoring. There's a lot of terrible offensive line play. There's been a weirdly large amount of like bad weather, primetime games. Everything top to bottom has kind of had that. So if you're Tom Brady, all I was going to say is he's picked a good time to do it because this has actually been quite a bad year of football. If you're going to complain, it's a good time to do it.
No, absolutely. I mean, you and I are speaking. Obviously, I'm a big Steelers fan. If you didn't know, and the Steelers played the Browns in a game with 2 6-3 teams who are both atrociously bad at least half of the game. And so you're looking at like which offense can blubber into points accidentally more than the other. I mean, and one of those teams came out of that game 7-3, and the other 6-4 and still in the playoffs. So it's like, that's
and the Browns are just a defense with some guys on the other side of the ball at this stage, and they're 7-3.
And the Steelers are the same, except the defense isn't as good.
Yeah,
when watching that game on Sunday, and all I could think was, the Browns are just a slightly better version of us at this point. Like they're doing the same thing. Right, they're playing the field position game. They're punting a lot and punting well. Right, you start patting the guy in the back for putting it inside the 10. You're like, yeah, that's the big play right there.
That's all some of us the offense can never get out of the.
Yeah, shadow your own goalpost, and then so you're scared to call anything, and so you're going 3 and out and punting it right back. And then all you need, you're getting the ball at midfield. All you need is 1 first down. You're kicking a field goal. And then, at the end of the game, you're trying to figure out who's going to score last or first. I mean, it doesn't matter. And it ended up being Cleveland.
At all.
At all, ever. So it ended up being Cleveland on Sunday. But yeah, lots of bad football. But I think your point about, I think the way he said it was, what about the guy's responsibility to protect himself? Right? And Brady was notorious for protecting himself, sometimes to the detriment of the team, and people get mad about it. Because if you so much as got close to him, particularly after his injury, he just fell down. He was like, no.
Hit the deck.
If my offensive line didn't block for me this play, we are going to live to fight another day. No, I'm not going to run around and get my head taken off.
And he was also excellent protecting his guys, right? The guys who couldn't take hits. You think of all the tiny receivers by NFL standards that they had: Wes Welker, Amendola, Julian Edelman,
I don't know, man.
These types of guys.
He ran those guys into a couple of concussions too.
Yeah, for sure. But in general, his ball placement was somewhat protective, right? I mean, he used a guy like Gronkowski.
He did not throw those balls across the middle,
right?
Unless he had
him in harm's way. It was behind him. He, make the guy slide down is very accurate. So yeah, he played the game that way. And yeah, I just think he's right.
And I'm not going to make it about America. Yeah, I was just going to say, not to make it too much about the deterioration of America as a culture, but we're seeing that a little bit in other places too right now. It's about the aggressor needs to feel bad for the aggressee. Like, you think about all this, we used to teach kids, if people are mean to you, ignore them because they don't matter. Like, protect yourself, your own ego. Now it's, well, if you see somebody being mean to somebody else, you stop them. No, that's it. Anyhow. Not to belabor the point of our softness as a culture right now, but the idea that it's okay if that guy who's coming to take your head off, you can protect yourself, you can go down, you can go out of bounds, you can brace yourself for the hit rather than trying to get 2 more yards. Those aren't bad football plays. And that was the point I was trying to make with Tom is, he would go down, and because he did, he was available to that team every game except for that one season when he went down with a knee in the first game. He was available, and that made that team better, and they won Super Bowls because he was available. Right. And so, yes, did he take more sacks than he had to? Almost certainly. Did he give up on plays that maybe he could have gotten Wes Welker killed over the middle? Certainly. But because of that, they had fewer injuries. They had guys who were healthy. He was healthy, and they were able to win games. So he's got a point, I think, on the way we teach the game today. because I think we teach it the other way. We say defensive guys don't hurt the offensive guys. Offensive guys do everything in your human power to get 1 more yard, 2 more yard, get that first down on this drive, because we think about the analytics and how important each possession is. In our, we've got to score, add EPA, expected points added every play, because accumulating EPA is how you win the game. And it's a very analytics driven game today. And all of those things are true, but we don't have an EPA for not being hurt. Right. And it's that piece of this that I think we could do better as offensive teachers of the game. Exactly. So the next thing, and I have to bring this up, and you and I have these conversations, Luke. It's not just about us, but it is our podcast, darn it. And my Pittsburgh Steelers finally have made a decision for the first time in 80 years, which does make you wonder if maybe I'm rooting for the wrong thing. But for the first time in 80 years, we have dismissed a coordinator during the season. Now, why this week is a really interesting question to me.
Yeah.
Not during the bye, not when, but and clearly we were miserable. You can't lose to Cleveland. Like, that's a thing the Steelers just can't do. You're not allowed to lose to Cleveland. And we lost to Cleveland, so that's never good. Obviously, we looked awful on offense doing it. We had exactly 1 offensive play for 74 yards. 1 offensive player, Jalen Warren, had 150 yards. The rest of the team had 140 on 3 times as many opportunities. I mean, the team was bad, but it's been bad all year. And so, why we decided this was the time, I don't know, but we did. And thank the good Lord. Mr. Canada, I wish you all the best in whatever your future endeavors may lead. It was not working, obviously, in Pittsburgh. No one ever likes to turn on the radio and hear the fans rejoice that they've been fired. But, of course, that's where Mr. Matt Canada finds himself today. And I will pile on, darn it. So we have removed Matt Canada as a fan of a team, Luke, who fired their offensive coordinator last year and brought in a new Wonderlic, awesome, great, super highfalutin offensive coordinator this year, and has turned the team around and created every opportunity for you to go to the Super Bowl. Maybe you want to rain on my parade a little bit?
No, not really. I'm not a big fan of not firing someone just because there's a chance it doesn't get better. Like, there's Matt Canada at this stage, it's a guarantee that it won't get any better. In fact, the offense is getting worse. You've got a young quarterback who's shown next to nothing in 2 years of starting games, and some of that's on him, some of that's on the scheme and all the rest of it. Won't get too much into that. It's pretty clear from anyone who's watched any Steelers games, which most people probably have tried to avoid on this basis for the last few months.
It's miserable.
It's miserable. Oh my God, it's miserable. And, Matt Canada was the coordinator when Roethlisberger was still obviously there. The dink and dunk, dink, 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 dink. That was it. There was no downfield component because Roethlisberger didn't want to get hit. Never really moved away from that. If Kenny Pickett can throw beyond 10 yards, I'm looking forward to seeing it, because frankly, he's done it about 3 times this year. It's been terrible use of resources. We were talking about Steelers a few weeks ago, and I didn't mention it, but one thing that I've found so frustrating in the games I've watched, there's a big thing about Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, right? Jalen Warren's all explosive and everyone's piling on how great he is, and he has been. I'm not shitting on him by any stretch. He's been very, very impressive. The use of Najee Harris is just so blatantly the wrong use of him as well. It reminded me exactly of when the Titans had Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. Fans of other teams, this did happen. And we would use basically Derrick Henry as if he was like TJ Duckett or something. We'll just run it straight up the middle, A gap, B gap. It's
straight up the middle. Yeah.
Just because he's big, it doesn't mean that that's what he does. And obviously since then he's gone on to flourish, right? Outside zones, getting to the edge, beating guys with his long speed, etc. and so on. I do feel like if you have at least give Najee Harris a chance to use his skill set as opposed to just pounding him straight between the center and the guard all the time, it would definitely help. So it's just an example of like misuse of resources on that front. He's been bad. I'm sure there are, songs of joy being sung from Punxsutawney to the confluence of the 3 rivers, Tim. No, not someone who was impressing.
Reaching
anybody.
For your Western Pennsylvania geography there.
Yeah. I've seen Groundhog Day. That's about as far as it goes. And I've been to Pittsburgh with you. That's my knowledge in a nutshell. But yeah, I'm not surprised.
Drove through Punxsutawney to get there.
I don't think anyone is surprised. I don't think any Steelers fan is upset, nor should they be. We're not a, hey, you should fire this guy podcast. But if anyone was going to get it in the neck, it was going to be Matt Canada. And that brings us on, Tim, talking about misuse of quarterbacks, miscoaching of quarterbacks, to the topic of the day, which we are eventually getting to, fair listener, which is the quarterback position in the NFL, the assessment of it, the evaluation of it before these guys become pros, when they become pros, how they're covered, the kind of misuse of statistics, the misuse of truisms and
quarterback wins, baby,
to describe everything under the sun. And Kenny Pickett is certainly one of those guys who has suffered in the mainstream media, if you want to call it that, from criticism. And I think fair criticism. But before that, when he was a youngster, when he was at Pitt, the University of Pittsburgh, when he was a first-round pick, Tim, as he was only, a year and a half ago, which seems kind of crazy, was the only first-round quarterback taken. He was seen as the only first-round prospect. He was the only first-round prospect, and that's pretty rare in the NFL these days. Quarterbacks are such a commodity.
Very.
The most important position on the field, the most important position, I would probably say, in any sport in terms of the relative importance that they bear on the outcome of the game that they play. A lot of guys get drafted in the first round. A lot of guys get drafted high in the first round. And what did a lot of these guys suffer from? Hype. Puts them in a bind before the first snap is taken. We've seen plenty of examples of this. I think Anthony Richardson this year was an example of this, right? The college season finishes. Yes, he's got spectacular physical capabilities. I think no one would deny that. Didn't have the best collegiate career from a statistical standpoint. Now his receivers dropped some passes, etc. We won't get into all that again now as we did pre-draft.
Sure.
But there's many examples of these guys getting thrown up the draft board from the end of the college season to the start of the draft in April, or whenever it is, end of April now that they moved it to. Lots of examples of guys falling foul of this. You think about Zach Wilson, you think about Trey Lance. I've, thought about like Jamarcus Russell, if we go all the way back there, or Paxton Lynch, guys like this who just get drafted on physical kind of stuff. The hype train gets a little crazy, Tim, before these guys have begun. I know it's something that's a bugbear of yours, that we go from, well, this guy wasn't a great college quarterback
to me.
Now we should start, and we should take him in the top 10.
And it's even worse. And you hit it there on the end. The number of guys who go from being borderline first round draft picks or early round draft picks, so all of a sudden they're in the top 10, and they don't do it during their senior season or their last season in college football. They do it somehow between the end of the season and the draft, where like all of a sudden NFL teams, GMs, certainly the media, they wake up, I guess, after paying no attention the preceding 3 years of this player's career. And now they watch his tape and they realize this guy is going to be the next blankety blank. And part of it you can forgive in the media, because in the media, well, listen, they got to write a story, right? They're looking for
interest, right? And most people don't care about the draft, or they used to not. That's how you do it.
Yeah, to somebody. Yeah, it's hard to come up with an angle all the time to write. And so you're looking for the next best thing, and you're not judged on your accuracy of, your ability to evaluate talent. You're a beat writer. But then you realize a lot of these guys are just spouting what coaches are telling them. Like, this happens in the draft room, and you can prove it because of where these guys end up getting drafted. And it's like NFL teams, guys, and if you don't know this, NFL teams scout 365 days a year. They're out there looking for players. There is an entire department of people who are looking. It's Mike Tomlin during the season is not going to college games. Got it. But there are people in the building who are. And they watch these guys play football, the real game between the lines against other people who play football. And they make an evaluation. And then they change that evaluation in the run up to the draft, because you get this hype train going, and then you got these expectations, and then you are second guessing yourself. Well, maybe this guy is the next guy. And we have convinced ourselves as a football populace that having a rookie star quarterback is the key to the universe, because, quarterbacks on their first contract have won so many Super Bowls in the last 3 decades, right? I mean, no, they haven't, but we think about it that way. This must be the key to the castle. This must be the path. We need the next Mahomes. We need that guy. But even Mahomes wasn't that guy. He didn't come in. He didn't get drafted first overall. He didn't start his first game. And so it's teams continuously do the same things, and they continuously look for the same things, and they continuously get the same outcomes, which are not what they're looking for. And so it's really frustrating if you think about the development of quarterbacks. You look at Green Bay, right? Green Bay is the only team, the only one, to draft a quarterback in the first round and sit him for multiple years. And they've done it twice in a row. And listen, now Jordan Love is not Aaron Rodgers. He's not. But he's looked competent.
Certainly not yet.
And I bet you he's looked better than he would have looked if they made him play the day they brought him out of college.
Yeah.
Like that's not a bad idea. And it is absolutely shunned in the NFL as a Mahomes sat. Lots of these guys have sat, and it's worked out very, very well. So if you think about sort of that entrance into the league, and you talk about setting a guy up for absolute abomination, you've put the weight of the world on a 21-year-old guy. And I feel like people forget that sometimes. These are kids. I mean, I remember very well being 21 years old and being an idiot, right? Like these guys aren't machines. They've been told they're wonderful their whole athletic careers. They've been the best kid on the best team in the best, conference, that everything they've ever done. And all of a sudden, now they're plopped onto what's probably a bad football team. They're in the press as the potential savior of said bad football team. They've been picked probably by a young coach who's getting his early opportunities, right? Like the types of situations you find yourselves in aren't set up well for success. And if they don't win in their first 5 games, we didn't get the guy. We don't have the guy. Kenny Pickett, right? When he came out, he actually, I thought relatively uncommonly so, but reasonably fairly great at his first year, right? Everybody knew the Steelers were bad. He was holding it together. He was doing enough in the fourth quarter when they kind of took the leash off.
Yeah.
But then, in the offseason this year, he was set up to be, the kid's going to take his sophomore leap, baby.
Sophomore leap.
Like, what? Why? Why? Why would he be so much better now than he was a year ago? He's the same guy. He's played no more football. He's had one more year with a playbook. And all of a sudden he comes into this year, plays, frankly, a lot like he played last year. And now we're all going, bust. Terrible. Throw him out. Get him out of here. And so it's very interesting to think about how we think about our quarterbacks, and then to assume that ultimately it has no impact on them as players. And then to transition a little bit, now the guy's in the league. How do we cover him? Well, Will Levis is a perfect example of this.
Right.
Brock Purdy is another one who's had a little more sustained success. You have your first game. If you come out and you impress, I mean, Will Levis came out through 4 touchdowns? 2 of them were 75 yards long. I mean, like they were crazy deep ball. I mean, look great. I mean, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. It was like him and, I don't know, Warren Moon or somebody. The only people who've ever done it. And you're like, okay, that's pretty good. But Ryan Clark,
good.
These people in the NFL press were saying the Titans have found their quarterback of the next 15 years. It's been one game.
Yeah.
One game, guy drinks mayonnaise in his coffee. And one game.
No, it's a good example because, listen.
Go ahead.
I think you hit on a couple of good points there. I mean, Pickett in his first year to use, just to piggyback for you were saying, fairly evaluated, right? Like rookie quarterbacks most of the time are not very good, right? There's degrees of not very good. There's,
right.
Disastrous. There's Jamarcus Russell, to use the same name, who was a complete car crash from day one. There's Ryan Leaf, the elite
terrible,
kind of the
Ryan Leaf.
Busts of all busts. Yeah. And then there's guys who look okay, who you go, well, there's something to work with here. I would think of a guy like Marcus Mariota, right? Obviously, as a Titans fan. I'm sure like Winston when he was with the Buccaneers. You think of like Jared Goff. These guys look okay. They look fine. They don't look like they're world beaters, but they look okay. Not many guys come in, light it up day one. It just rarely happens. CJ Stroud's doing it this year, and the reason it's being covered this way is because it very, very rarely happens that a guy looks this good this early. If you think about historically, to your point about not learning lessons of the past, I mean, how good was Peyton Manning in his first year? It was terrible. He threw a lot of interceptions, not touchdowns. That would have been good.
Not so many touchdowns.
Tom Brady was a game manager. right?
Yeah,
Don't lose
28
the game.
interceptions to 26 touchdowns that year. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Tom Brady, game manager, don't lose the game. Ben Roethlisberger, game manager, don't lose the game. When Steve Young was a young quarterback going all the way back, he was a running around, reckless, doing crazy crap type of guy, and he became a Hall of Fame. These are all Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So I think people forget that used to happen. And I know the eras have changed and the rules have changed and it's more collegiate and whatever, but the shortness of the leash on these guys certainly doesn't help. It doesn't help you play your way into a positive NFL career. Like you think of a guy like Josh Rosen, right? Now, listen, for one reason or another, he's never really played much football, but comes into the Cardinals, not a very good team, doesn't look all that great. And listen, I'm not saying he would have gone on to become Warren Moon or even, Donovan McNabb or someone like that. I'm not saying he would have been a good NFL pro, but new coach, new GM come in, they take a quarterback the next year and you're just done. You are just done. Like, how are you expected to get better if you feel that unconfident? And to the point you made about young coaches is a great one. Mahomes is a great use case for how to do it the right way. You got Andy Reid, brilliant coach, established head coach who knows how to run the organization and the offense. You have a veteran quarterback in Alex Smith who is as solid as they come, not spectacular, not a threat to be the long-term guy, but he's a good player and played well for that team. People forget that he was actually very good. They got to the playoffs his final year. Titans beat them, no biggie. But Mahomes comes in, having had that tutelage for a year, right? And he throws 50 touchdown passes. There is a lesson there. Throwing a guy in with kind of no help. You look at Bryce Young this year, really struggled, right? And for every CJ Stroud, there are 8 Bryce Youngs, 5, 6 Bryce Youngs who really look terrible because they've just got no help around them. And I think it kind of feeds into a topic we're going to touch on, so maybe we'll get into it now, which is just like people looking at the quarterback as an island in the NFL, right?
Absolutely.
Performance of a quarterback,
and specifically the idea that quarterback arc. Yep.
Yeah. No. I was going to say is like the Will Levis example to be a good one, right? He comes in, throws 4 touchdowns. The next 2 games, he threw 0 touchdowns. And lots of people will come out and say, well, started hot, but he's really struggled the last couple of games. As someone who watches these games, I can tell you very little of the problem was Will Levis. The offensive line couldn't block anyone in the run or the pass. The receivers can't get open. And it's terrible play calling. You watch the tape or you watch the game, the broadcast copy, and it's evident. But because it's such a takes league where you have to know about whatever's going on across everyone, it was like, well, he's really struggling. It's like, well, quarterbacks aren't independent of the team. The quarterback is part of the team. Now, he's the most important cog. There's no question about that. But the idea that quarterback play, when things go well, it's the quarterback. It's not like the wider structure around them that helps them succeed. We're going to talk a lot about Purdy in a minute, so I won't get into it. But think about the structure around him and playing his way into confidence, right? Like he's had that opportunity because he's had the leash and he's had the chance to play his way into the NFL in a kind of progressively, increasing responsibility and reads and all the rest of it as he's gone along, which is great. That's how you want to do it. But most people don't get that. And the problem is then the coverage, to your point, is the quarterback's an island. He sucks. He's great. There's no other considerations given. So it's a frustrating one when you're watching the coverage to see it looked at in such a simplistic way.
Yeah, and I think, Luke, I mean, to me, the quarterback arc isolated from the team arc is one of the more, and that's, the opposite side of that coin is Patrick Mahomes, right? Everyone thinks Kansas City got good when Patrick Mahomes got there, to your point earlier. They were good before he got there. Now, did he take them to the next level? Of course he did. He's a he's a big talent. My word
transcendent is the word you were trying to get
That's
to.
the one. But listen, I think he's very good, and he's a generational talent, but they were good before he got there. And to your point, he had a great coaching staff, understood how to use his talents. There are places around the league, San Francisco is another, that is going to make the quarterback better because of the system structure. You take your pick. Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, when he started as a rookie, I remember very, very vividly going, well, there goes that season, right? All right, you had Tommy Maddox go down. Game 2 of the season, you're like, oh no. Ben Roethlisberger comes in, rookie nobody, and they set him up for success. They had Jerome Bettis. He ran for 1,000,000 yards. They did
Veteran
quick,
coach.
easy pass plays off the play action. Veteran coach knew what he was doing. Great transcendent. There we go. Defense, right? You think about how good that team was, and all of a sudden that team's playing an AFC Championship game and then winning a Super Bowl. And that was not Ben Roethlisberger's career arc. Ben Roethlisberger's career arc was much later. Ben Roethlisberger peaked when they weren't winning Super Bowls. The second Super Bowl was more Ben than the first Super Bowl, certainly, for Super Bowl 40 versus 43. But Ben was better in Super Bowl 45 and they lost the game. Ben was better with the Killer B offenses in the early 2010s than he was in the late aughts when we won the Super Bowls. But everyone thinks about the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger's career arc as the same thing. Oh, the Steelers struggled the entire second half of Ben's career. No, they just didn't win Super Bowls. But that's because the defense turned over. It's because we invested in the offensive line. And all of a sudden, we didn't have a defense. And it's very hard to have the team gel and come cohesively together at one point. You think about the Jets, the New York Jets. Their quarterbacks never have a chance to succeed because they're so broken in 1,000 other places that everybody thinks, oh, well, and now, right now they're a quarterback away and can't get the quarterback thing right. Well, guess what? If they have the quarterback, then they're not going to have the other things. That's why winning in the NFL is hard. And it's very frustrating for Kenny Pickett's of the world to come out and say, okay, I'm supposed to be better in year 2. Why? Is the defense better? No. Is the running game better? Maybe a little because we're giving Jaylen Warren the ball more. I don't know. Are the wide receivers better? No. Pickens is great, but he's kind of a one-trick pony at this point. You've had injuries at that position. Like, what was supposed to make him better?
Right.
We didn't get better on the offensive line. We didn't get better at the skill position. We didn't get better on defense. Why is Kenny Pickett all of a sudden supposed to get better? Because it's a year later. He's a year older. He's knows the playbook better. So those types of things, and just sort of assuming that, it's going to get better. That's not how it works. You've got to have your quarterback and your team arcs line up to have that success. And so often they don't. They're independent things. There's one player on a team of 53 active guys on the roster, and the teams that figure that out early on and say, I'm going to protect my young quarterback because his career arc's not lining up with the team right now, are the ones that are successful. And so often the beneficiary of that in the media is the quarterback himself, getting perhaps a bit more publicity than he deserves.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know. I think you hit the nail absolutely on the head there, which is, really coaches and quarterbacks don't have the same incentive structure a lot of the time, right? They both want to win, but for coaches, it's win or I get shit canned, right? The quarterback will outlive the head coach a lot of the time when you have these young quarterbacks brought in and a new coach, right? A lot of the time, those coaches do get canned after 1 or 2 years. The rookie quarterbacks with their first round picks, you got 5 years of team control if you want it. So it's a tough needle to thread to get them built in the right way. And I think an example I was going to use to your point is Tua. Is a great example of this, in my opinion, right? When you talk about things lining up or not lining up. Under Brian Flores, he came in, he had the injury from college. He didn't look great. He got injured again. He came back. They started doing the weird rotational thing where they brought in Fitzpatrick for the end of games. It was all very strange. Right?
When they were going to win.
yeah, right. And everyone was saying Tua sucks and he's never going to go anywhere and all this kind of stuff. Guess what? You bring in Mike McDaniel, and you get Mike McDaniel and Mike McDaniel designs an offense around what Tua is very, very good at, which is quick ball handling in the backfield, excellent accuracy in the short and intermediate areas, timely shots, and of course, you put players around him who are excellent in the things that he's good at, like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. These guys are great run after catch guys. They're speed guys. Of course, having Tyreek Hill is going to help you, but that's exactly what you're saying, right? Surround them with things that will make them look better. Tua's played at a fantastic level since McDaniels got there. That is not a surprise if you think about it in the macro sense. But instead, what we get sucked into is this, the quarterback is responsible for all the failures or is responsible for all the successes. Neither of those two things is true. And the thing I wanted to hit on this just before we move on is, people accused Tua of this. They accused, Brady of this before. This whole he's a system quarterback, like this. Oh my God, you can't have a system quarterback. God forbid.
Yep.
You have to have
that.
You have to have one of the 5 quarterbacks ever that could run any.
He would
system.
work in any team.
Genuinely in the NFL today, how many quarterbacks could run any system? None. The answer is none. You couldn't have Mahomes running the Ravens offense where he has to run it 20 times a game, and you couldn't have Lamar Jackson run the Chiefs offense. So everyone is a system quarterback to some degree. Now, there are guys who can do it in multiple areas, right? You think about Mahomes, you think about probably a Joe Burrow.
Sure.
But you are talking like only a couple, really. Only a couple. And how many of them have proven
to do it in multiple offenses? Your point, it's still not, it's still not across the board, right? Tom Brady could never have run the Kansas City Chiefs offense. He's not mobile enough. Right. It's the best quarterbacks ever were still better at some things than they were at others.
And the offensive system was designed around what they were good at. And that's what someone like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, those guys, Andy Reid, they can do this. They have the wherewithal and the offensive, structure and scheme around them to either bring in a guy who knows how to run their system and run it, or adapt their system to the guy who they are bringing in. They are your 2 options. You can't just bring in a system and bring in a quarterback and hope the 2 things go together. If you brought in Chip Kelly and for ask your parents, kids, and brought in Joe Flacco, right? You couldn't have that offense work. You can't have the slow statue running a blur offense. Like it's simple kind of things, but people never talk about it. Which I just find it curious that it's always the same, like repetition, when actually everyone is a system quarterback to a degree, and that's fine. Like the systems are there to be used, so that's why they should be there.
That's what a coach's job is design a system around the talent of his players.
And if you look at guys who've had success, like out of the blue kind of success, like Josh Dobbs this year, right? Baker Mayfield threw 5 touchdowns for the Rams in a game last year. Do you not think that the offensive coach is pretty damn good to get that guy to play that way? Like, it's not he just turned up and suddenly Josh Dobbs is better than he's ever been. Like, Kevin O'Connell has done a really good job working with him in a very short period of time and saying, this is what you're going to run and this is how you run it. Same with Sean McVay and Baker when he had the very limited run there. It's hard. It can be done. It just requires an excellent coach. And I think that kind of brings us on to, Tim, a couple of our, I guess, favorite, not so favorite covered players in the National Football League today, which are quarterbacks. We talk about the structures needed to have a successful team. Quarterback is a big part of that. And there's a couple of guys we wanted to highlight as victims of, subjects of that kind of very simplistic media coverage, which, to be honest, fair listener, is a big reason that we started doing the podcast, which is this sort of misallocation of blame, misallocation of credit. So there's 2 guys that I wanted to touch on, and I know these are 2 guys you're interested in as well, Tim, and maybe you have some others, but we can start with podcast favorite Russell Wilson. I know you're one of your favorite players of all time.
Oh boy.
I will give you the floor as you want to give me the 30,000 foot Tim view on Russell, or Danger Russ Wilson, or whatever we're calling him, Mr. Unlimited, and your thoughts on the coverage of him versus perhaps
Mr. Unlimited, Robot Russell, Danger Russ.
No one has ever said
my favorite Lion Heart.
Robot Russell. No one's ever said Robot Russell ever. It's on Pro Football Reference, I think, right?
I just want you to know it's on his Pro Football Reference page. Robot Russell. Yeah, I don't know where that's from. But anyhow, Robot Russell, my favorite Russell Wilson, that's his name. My favorite Russell Wilson stats of all time, though, are when you compare him to other players and you go, wait, what? Huh? Because sometimes I think we get like these counting stats, they add up to say he's thrown for 42,000 yards. That I have is that a lot? Is that not a lot? How many is that? He is a interesting quarterback. He is definitely a system quarterback, though we've just noted that's not necessarily a bad thing. What is Russell Wilson's system? Russell Wilson's system is turn around, hand the ball to the other guy, turn around, hand the ball to the other guy, turn around, hand the ball to the other guy. And then when you finally start tackling that guy, he throws the ball to the guy running behind you. And so he's deep ball specialist. Not many of those in NFL history, really, who don't have an intermediate game, really, don't have a short game. He is a deep ball guy. He throws the ball a long way, incredibly accurately.
Yeah,
he might be the best deep ball ever. But that's it. That's it. And so just bear with me. All right.
Yeah, no, I
So
hear you. He's got a fantastic
the
deep ball. No question
challenge,
about it.
he does. The challenge with Russ is if you look at games his team has played in where he does more of the work, they tend to lose. And that's not the right direction for a quarterback that's driving the bus. When he was talking his way out of Seattle, right? The last couple of years he was in Seattle, let Russ cook, blah, 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 blah. Stop it. When they let Russ cook, they lost football games. And Russ is also proof in the pudding of my number one least favorite thing about success, or quarterbacks who have success early in their careers. And you could talk about Carson Wentz. You could talk about Deshaun Watson. You could talk about, even Joe Flacco and his little runs there. Once you have had a run, especially if you are on a team that wins a Super Bowl, and I'm very careful not to say you win a Super Bowl because
yes, good save.
When the Seattle Seahawks were winning Super Bowls, had nothing to do with what Russell Wilson was doing other than he wasn't losing the game. Just like, to be fair, Ben Roethlisberger had nothing to do with the Steelers winning their first Super Bowl except for he wasn't losing the game. And so at the end of the day, he got branded as one of these guys. He got a ton of endorsement deals. They won a Super Bowl. They went back to another Super Bowl the next year. You thought, oh, the second coming of Jesus, or at least that's what he would have you believe if you listen to his commentary after the Super Bowl loss. He is just a guy. If you look at his statistics year over year and you compare them with Ryan Tannehill, save for about 15 rushing yards a game, they're almost the same. It's shocking how he is not a guy that's gone out there and done anything. But because early in his career, he had this success with, if not the best, one of the best defenses in the history of the NFL, he would never be in the conversation as a top quarterback. He's getting the accolades. He's got the Pro Bowls because he's in that bucket, but he's never been the guy driving that bus. And if I could defend Russell Wilson for a minute, he's not too different a guy than he was 5 years ago, but he's being asked to do a very different thing, and it's a thing he's not good at doing. And now everybody says, oh, Russell Wilson sucks. No, Russell Wilson's the same sucky quarterback he was in Seattle. But Seattle built a system around him and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring in 1,000 running backs and a good offensive line, and we're going to ground and pound and let Russell Wilson run around and throw a ridiculous Hail Mary bomb to the back corner of the end zone. And we're going to have one of our great wide receivers tiptoe on the back corner and catch it falling out of bounds. Russell Wilson is the number one quarterback for, I've thrown 4 interceptions today, almost cost us the game. Maybe I can throw a touchdown pass in the last drive to win it, and all we ever remember is the end. And it's done a disservice to him as a player. It's done a disservice to the teammates that he's played with. And frankly, it's put him in the position he's in now to be thought of as less successful than he might have otherwise if he didn't push so hard to be thought of as the guy who was driving the bus. That's my Russell Wilson. I don't know what you think.
No, I think broadly speaking, you're right, Tim. And I think you hit on the right thing at the top, which is this is a guy who's had a lot of success in the NFL, right? You and I are not pro Russell Wilson. You know, he's the great quarterback. He's a Hall of Famer, which a lot of the media infrastructure, shall we say, is a fan of. He's had a ton of success. He's had more success than 90% of NFL quarterbacks are ever going to have, right? And he has a skill set. And his skill set is he's got a phenomenally good feel, accuracy, power, whatever you want to call it, on the deep pass. He's mobile, maybe not as much as he used to be, but he can get outside the pocket. He can improvise. He can create these kind of wow splash plays, which look great on the highlights. And he doesn't turn the ball over. They're 3, and those are 3 fantastic attributes to have in a quarterback, by the way. That's 3 great things to have. The issue is he did get branded early as a winner, and he is one of the last guys that this is true of, because I really feel like wins have died out in the same way that, you know, for those who don't watch baseball, that used to be, you know, pitcher wins. Brock Purdy. Huge thing. Yeah, but anyway, we can get to Brock Purdy in a second. But Russell Wilson is he's a winner. He plays winning football. So even when he doesn't play very well, then they win. Well, he's a winner, and it's the clutch gene, and it's all these like terrible sports talky, cliche bullshit things which are thrown at someone unfairly both to the team he plays for, as you say, to the coaching staff, because I think Pete Carroll didn't get anywhere near as much credit as he could have. They kept churning offensive coordinators to try and get more out of Wilson and change it. They then went.
Do you know he's one of the oldest coaches in the NFL?
Because it worked.
Luke,
it's going to come up every week. But he's a QB wins guy, which it just annoys me because it's like it's not an accurate way to evaluate any player, even the quarterback. It's a structure, it's a team, and the Seahawks built a great system around him, and he excelled in that system. He played well in that system. There's nothing wrong with that. But his career is a story of being timely, being accurate with your timely plays, and don't be Aaron Rodgers. He's never been Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. And he had that almost foisted upon him. And don't get me wrong, he embraced it because that's his personality, whatever. He's confident. That's what you want. He's never been that guy. And I've looked at some statistics around this to back it up, right? Because I thought I knew you were going to shit on Russell Wilson. I probably would too. So I thought I'd be fair, right? Let's look at his statistical, performance. So this year, the Denver Broncos are on this hot streak, right? Russell Wilson's back, blah, blah, blah. What Sean Payton has done is go back to the system in Seattle that worked well when Russell Wilson was leading a team that was winning games, which is you run the ball and you're timely. Russell Wilson's attempted 30 or more passes 5 times this season. Denver has won one of those games. And that was the game that they just played against the Vikings. They've won one, they lost the other 4. They're 5-1 when he throws under 30 passes. Maybe there's a secret. So I thought, why don't we look at Russell Wilson's career? Russell Wilson's career is 183 games at this point. 94 games, he's thrown fewer than 30 passes. He's won 76% of those games. 71-23, which is great by any stretch of the imagination. If we want to use QB wins, right? Because we're QB wins. So 76% of the games that he's played when he's attempted fewer than 30 passes, the team has won. In the 98 games that he's attempted more than, I think my math's off by 1, but whatever, you get the idea, 99 games. He's won 49% of them. So if he attempts more passes, he loses more games. Now, I thought this would be interesting because we think about it logically, right? If you're winning a game, you don't need to throw as much because you already have the lead. You run, you want to control the clock. It's a different type of game. So in the interest of fairness, I looked at a quarterback by the name of Tom Brady. Tom Brady.
Oh, he's pretty good.
Pretty good. Won a lot of games on some very good teams, had some very good defenses, had a great coach. A lot of similarities apart from the obvious, which is Tom Brady's a lot better. Tom Brady in his career had only 93 games where he threw fewer than 30 passes, and he played for 23 years. So Russell Wilson's already played more games in which he's attempted fewer than 30 passes than Tom Brady had his entire career. Sorry, he's played one more. So he's played one more game in which he's attempted 30 or fewer passes than Tom Brady had in his 23-year career. Tom Brady won 81% of the games that he threw under 30 passes, 30 or fewer. He won 73% of the games he threw for more than 30 attempts. So he played 251 games where he had 30 or more attempts, and he won 73% of those. He had 93 games where he threw fewer than 30 times, and he won 81% of those. So he won more, but he still won a lot of games when he threw the ball more. And the reason I used attempts is that shows you how much responsibility he's really bearing. You can use yards. Yards can be misleading, right? You can have a guy throw for 400 yards in a loss. You can have garbage time. Yards don't win you games. And Russell Wilson's thrown for a lot of touchdowns. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the great things about his career, statistically speaking, is the touchdown count and the low interception rate. But he's not been at his best when he throws the ball a lot. So, that kind of bears out what you were saying. So statistically speaking, if you're going to use wins as the metric, which is what Russell Wilson's kind of legacy is based upon, the legacy, when it's unpacked, shows you that the more attempts he has, the fewer games he wins relative. And I thought under 500, when you throw more than 30 passes, for a guy who is being touted as a Hall of Famer, is not good. Like, that shouldn't really happen, because if you're playing that well and you're a winner, you should win more games than that.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And I was looking up other quarterbacks too. Tom Brady is obviously one. You think about more prolific passers of the football, the guys like Peyton Manning, very similar story, right? Certainly, and I want people to know Luke and I aren't stupid. We understand that a team that is throwing the ball more is doing so for a reason, and maybe that's because they're behind, and maybe so you're going to generally have a worse record when there are more pass attempts. That's true regardless of who your quarterback is. But it's the gap between those two. It's when your team needs you to go ham. Is that good or is that bad? And in Russell Wilson's case, there's actually you can see games where they didn't need him to go ham, where the game was not out of they weren't trailing by 6 touchdowns. The game was close the whole time, and for whatever reason, they kept going back to that well, and he would throw a pick. He would get the strip sack. He would like he was not the key to winning football for that franchise. And so, listen, we beat up on Russell Wilson. He's obviously pretty good at doing what he does, or he wouldn't be allowed to do it anymore. He's obviously incredibly overpaid in Denver, and they're going to have to deal with that for a long time. If we switch gears a little bit to somebody who is a little earlier in the Russell Wilson phase of their career and that of Brock Purdy. And this is an area that I know I have been asked to talk about on the podcast by many people. Well, what do you think about Brock Purdy? Is Brock Purdy the next Tom Brady? You're hearing a lot of those comparisons too, by the way. Brock Purdy's the next Tom Brady. And I get it. Late round draft pick. Now, Mr. Irrelevant's a whole different thing than, 6th rounder. But late round draft pick. Didn't expect to come in and play, came in and played because of injury, took advantage of the opportunity, won a lot of games. Brock Purdy doesn't have a Super Bowl yet, I don't think, so maybe we pump the brakes a little bit there. But if you look at Brock Purdy's statistics on an even money basis, he is leading the league in a lot of good categories. He is playing the position very well. He looks good on QBR. He looks good on rating. He looks good on sort of passing yards, even top 10 in passing yards, top 10 in passing touchdowns. And so
yards per attempt is high.
I want to be really clear. Like I'm not going to crap on his game, but this comes back to this whole conversation of how teams think about quarterbacks, how the media thinks about quarterbacks, how fans think about quarterbacks. He has not done anything yet in his career to distinguish himself from other quarterbacks who started strong. And contrary to popular belief, quarterbacks that start strong are not necessarily quarterbacks who finish strong. I mean, there is a series of guys out there, and Carson Wentz is my favorite. When Carson Wentz came out, he was going to be the next thing. You had Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, or a couple other people who were kind of coming out around the same time. Everyone was like, "Oh, these are the next guys." Lamar has been able to sustain it. Most of the others have not. And there are others, kind of in that bucket. And I'm not saying whether he's Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz or Tom Brady or that any of those is a bad outcome. But the fact that people are already piling into this kid as if he's the second coming of Tom Brady, he's 12, 15 games into his career.
15 regular season games
way.
and 2 playoff games.
Yeah. So think about it this way. You've got Brock Purdy, who, if he comes on and has a Dak Prescott career, by all measures, that's a successful NFL career.
Well, you knocked it out of the park relative to where he was drafted, right?
100%. You've played well. You get your second contract. You come in. You win some games for your team. You win a couple of playoff games. Do you get to the promised land? Maybe, maybe not. But that's a win for that kid. But now, no. If he doesn't go win 7 Super Bowls, he's a disappointment. He won his first game. I forget. I don't know the numbers. I don't care. His first however many games. Then he goes on a 3-game losing streak, and everybody's like, "Oh, I don't know. Brock Purdy, not very good." You want me to go through the list of quarterbacks who have had 3-game losing streaks and not played well? There's every long list of really good quarterbacks who have that. So we're on this roller coaster with 24-hour news cycle, whether we're whatever it is, where we want to crown the guy right now. Right now. What is he right now? Tell me his career is going to look like 25 years from now. Right now, tell me now. And it does a disservice to the team, does a disservice to the quarterback, the players. Kyle Shanahan, the Shanahan coaching tree puts their quarterbacks in positions to succeed. Period. End of story. And I know you're going to tell us more about that, Luke, so I'll leave it at a high level. But Brock Purdy is the benefit of more blown coverages than any quarterback in the league. And that's not because the defenses he's playing are worse. It's because the offensive system he has always gets a guy open. And listen, Brock Purdy's finding that guy. And that's a huge talent. As a coach of kids who play football, we can often scheme a guy open, right? The kids are playing defense too. And so it's pretty easy to get a guy open because you can confuse the defense. But your quarterback's got to find the guy who gets open. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of kids who can't do that. Now I'm coaching 9-year-olds. So, you would expect the pros can do a little bit better. But Brock Purdy's done an excellent job
He's a bust.
of finding the open receivers. And you don't see that with every quarterback. So taking nothing away from the guy, but he's been put in the best possible situation. Why don't we slow roll it a little bit more? Why don't we say, man, he's playing well. Really proud of that kid coming out of college, not a heralded name, got slotted in behind a guy who they paid 3 first-round draft picks for, was on this huge top 3 pick. What are we going to do? Maybe I'll make the team. Maybe I won't make the team. I'm looking for an opportunity to play somewhere else and ends up being the starting quarterback. That's a great story. Why can't we leave that the story rather than trying to christen the next? If he becomes the next Tom Brady, wins 7 Super Bowls, let's applaud that too. But let's not put that as the expectation on the kid going into year 1, year 2. So that's my take, Luke. I don't know what you had.
No, I think that's 100% right. And I think one thing that we didn't mention with Wilson and the other, and they're kind of talking about the coverage, which I think is especially true of Brock Purdy, is it's obviously it's all quarterback coverage is overblown, as we have said. But the other problem is if you criticize someone, or even not criticize, but just don't sing them to high heaven, right? You're preying on his downfall, or you're a hater, or whatever these social media age terms are about. You think the guy sucks because you don't think he's the best quarterback since Joe Montana. Brock Purdy has been playing phenomenally well. If you consider his journey to where he is, it's unparalleled what he's doing. Genuinely, it's unparalleled what he's doing. As this early in his career, Tom Brady wasn't doing this when he was coming as a 6th round pick, right? He was managing the game, don't make any mistakes, and hand it off 50 times a game. But the point with Brock Purdy is if you don't say
this just in, Luke Grundy says Brock Purdy is better than Tom Brady.
He's much better, and he always will be, and that's the end of the story. No, the point is I was actually racking my brains to think if there is, this isn't exaggeration, is there ever been a comparable situation for a quarterback to come into? Ever?
No.
I couldn't think of one. You've got the best defense in the league. You've got a Hall of Fame left tackle. You've got a Hall of Fame tight end. You've got a Hall of Fame running back. And you've got 2 all-pro level wide receivers and one of the best offensive minds in football today at once. And all of those guys are in their primes. I mean, Trent Williams getting older, but you've got all these guys at the exact point in their careers that they're going to be at their best. That isn't to say it's easy to do this. So go on. Yeah, you want to say something?
Closest might be Patrick Mahomes. And you think about the situation he came into in Kansas City with an excellent offensive line, an excellent coach, couple of wide receivers that were legitimate. The defense wasn't what they have in San Francisco right now, but a very good defense. Right. But you think, realistically, that might be the closest comparison.
Right. And even then,
obviously both did something with it.
Yeah. And even Patrick Mahomes didn't have Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams and it is a Death Star of offensive talent, which we just haven't really seen, all to be at the perfect point in their careers. It's incredible what they've assembled. Credit to John Lynch and the guys who do the evaluation there. And the trade for McCaffrey has completely transformed this team. He throws to guys who are, on average, the 2nd most open in the league. Ahead of him is Lamar, behind him is Jalen Hurts. That makes sense because Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson run around all the time. So you have to keep guys into spy. Brock Purdy's not going to beat you with his legs. So it does make sense. But the scheme is amazing. And just one thing to say before we get into kind of some of the statistics is people always wonder, how do you account for how good the scheme is versus how good the guy is? Now, your point is exactly right. Throwing it to an open player is not as easy as it seems. And he's done brilliantly. Process it quick. Hit the receiver in stride. He's accurate in the short and intermediate range, doesn't have the strong arm, but he's, throws with enough anticipation, get it out there, give the guy a chance. He's done all that great. But you look how often he hits his back foot and throws it. It's a lot. And that's because the read is open. The reason the read is open is that the defense is not ready for it because the offense is well designed. If you see a quarterback who looks as in rhythm as he does, it's only because the scheme is good enough. It's the only reason. Because you see Mahomes drop back. Mahomes has got all the talent on earth. You see him drop back, hit his back foot, and go, I can't throw it, no one's open, all the time. Brock Purdy, a lot of the time, goes, hit the back foot throw, hit the back foot throw, hit the back foot throw. Now, being decisive is hard. Throwing it to the guy is hard. But if you're watching a TV copy and you're wondering how to kind of think about it, it's an easy kind of quick way to make that assessment, right? A lot of the time it's because the first read is going to be open and he's throwing it to the first read, which is great. Doesn't mean he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But again, this doesn't mean we're crapping on Brock Purdy. It's just like that's the reality of the situation he's in and he's maximizing it. What I thought would be interesting to kind of account for this is to look at the Kyle Shanahan effect. You mentioned it, right? Kyle Shanahan making guys look great is a thing, right? It's a thing. And the comparisons that get drawn for Brock Purdy, the most common one is Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So when the Niners made the Super Bowl, Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019, I'll just read you the stat line here. 3,900 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 69% completion percentage, 8.4 yards per attempt.
Pretty good.
Jimmy Garoppolo is not that good. I don't know if that's news to you, Tim. He's never shown anything like that anywhere else. Phenomenal. He's had 2 years where he started. He got injured in the middle, but the 2 years he started with Kyle Shanahan, he was 8.4 yards per attempt, 8.6. Like that's high, especially for a guy who's not, launching it. He's not Russell Wilson, right? Jimmy G can't throw it deep that well. Now, the leading players on that team, the kind of key pieces, the rushing attack was three-headed. It was Raheem Mostert. It was Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman. Kittle was there. And you had Debo, who was a rookie. So you had some talent, but not equivalent to what Purdy has got. The second example I wanted to give is at a higher level, but I kind of think is a little bit lost in the shuffle, which is when Matt Ryan was with the Falcons and Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator. Matt Ryan had a very good career. Matt Ryan had 1 year in which he looked like the best quarterback in the history of time when he won the MVP and they went to the Super Bowl and blew the 28-3 lead. Career high in yards, career high in touchdowns, career high in completion percentage, 70%. Career high in yards per attempt, career low in picks. And he did it on only 534 passes, which is the third lowest total of his entire career when he played all 16 games. One of those seasons is his rookie year. So does this sound familiar? Fewer passes, higher success rate, yards per attempt super high. This is a guy who played a long time in the league and his career year was under this offense. Now, they had Julio Jones. That'll help. But the other players on this team, Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman at running back, so good rushing attack again, but not Christian McCaffrey, but good rushing attack. The next two receivers leading were Mohamed Sanu, who was fine, Taylor Gabriel, who was just a guy, and Matt Ryan put up these absurd statistics and led the team to the brink of a Super Bowl championship with Kyle Shanahan. Now, Brock Purdy last year, 67% completion percentage, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 8.1 yards per attempt, only threw 170 passes and threw for 1,374 yards in the regular season. All I'm saying is, does this sound familiar? Does any of that sound,
it does.
Common across different quarterbacks? Now, of those three, talent-wise, Matt Ryan went third overall and was a very talented collegiate quarterback. Jimmy G was good, and Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. So on talent maximization, you have to say Brock Purdy's outperformed versus the other two guys. But all I'm saying is, bringing it back to what we said originally, it matters. This stuff matters, and you do have to look below the surface level of wins, of just the raw box scores to get a grasp on it. Look or listen back to the statistics I just read out. I'm not going to read them again because it'll take forever. There is a serious common thread between these three players, all of whom have similar physical profiles in terms of they're not going to run for a lot of yards. It's a system which generates high reward and high result. Brock Purdy making the most of that is not saying Brock Purdy sucks. But saying Brock Purdy has by far the most around him of any of those three players is also fair. So he had a perfect passer rating last weekend. He had a game earlier this year where he was almost 100% completions, I think, or he was 100% completions, I want to say. It's fun. It's phenomenal. Like, it is phenomenal. you do handicap it a bit because of what he's got around him. And it's obvious that Kyle Shanahan makes quarterbacks better. That is just a fact. Now, if Brock Purdy goes on to become the best quarterback in the history of football, I will be the first one clapping him into Canton. The story's incredible. What he's done is fantastic. How he's playing is amazing. However, to your point, let's not put the kid under this 15-year guaranteed Super Bowl window crap when the one game he's played this year without the entire Avengers around him, right? When Debo was injured, Trent Williams was either injured, missed a game, or didn't play at 100%. They lost all 3 games. They scored 17 points per game, and he threw 5 interceptions. That doesn't mean he's bad either, but it's reality. No. So that's my treatise on Brock Purdy. So there's a lot of me talking there.
I think that's all right. I do want to transition if we can, and I'm going to have a quick hitter and come back on Brock Purdy's perfect passer rating this weekend when we get through this. But it's that time of the show where we need to crown our Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week. And today's Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week is on brand, on point, on topic.
On brand.
Because whether it was Secret Bajent Man, whether it was Will Mayonnaise Levis, or whether it was this guy, there have been some rookie quarterbacks who have come out and who have had a game that makes you think maybe for a bad team or a team that was not playing well. Who was it this week? And tell us more about our Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week.
It was Tommy DeVito, Tim, quarterback, New York Giants. Has to be, right? Has to be.
Oh, has to be.
It's fair to say when he came in week 8 against the Jets and went 2 for 7 for -1 yard, we probably didn't see this one coming.
No, sir.
Tommy DeVito, Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week. Of course, as a reminder, Jonas Gray Memorial Players of the Week are those who come out of the clear blue sky to do something amazing, put in a great performance. And whilst Jonas Gray himself went back into obscurity, we hope all of these guys go on to long, successful NFL careers. And this week it's Tommy DeVito, 6'2", 210 pounds, from Livingston, New Jersey, so a local to the tri-state area. I'm not exactly sure that he's a real person still, or if he's a composite of every New Jersey Italian American guy just put through like a funnel into one human being. But he shares his name with Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas. I couldn't find out if that was intentional or not, but if it is, then clearly his parents didn't watch the entire film.
Well played.
He said himself, I always say I'm from Jersey. I'm prideful about it. This is a Jersey guy. And if the career doesn't pan out, I'm sure you'll catch him down the shore, propping up a bar stool and having a few beers. But he went to Don Bosco Prep in New Jersey, which has produced quite a lot of NFL players as a high school. Jabril Peppers, Al-Quadin Mohammed. Do you remember Ryan Grant, who used to play for the Packers, the running back? He went there as well. So, Don Bosco putting out some dudes who make it to the league. Tommy DeVito won the state title as a junior. As a senior, he threw for 16 touchdowns in 9 games, played in the All-American game that the high school kids have. Then he committed to Syracuse, so staying in state. He had offers from Yale and the University of Pennsylvania, Tim. So the Ivies were circling young Tommy. He went instead to Syracuse, home of... Can you name me another quarterback who went to Syracuse, Tim? There is one quite famous one of late that you would be familiar
with. Of late?
NFL. Well, of the last 25 years.
I have no idea.
Played in Philadelphia. Also played in Washington and Minnesota, I think, too. Was
McNabb?
Donovan McNabb. It was Donovan McNabb, exactly right. So he played at Syracuse. So Tommy DeVito was a redshirt freshman, played a little bit of game time, came in against North Carolina, threw 3 touchdowns in a double overtime win when he replaced the starter who got injured. So, some early promise. 2019, he was the starter, threw for 19 scores. Then he got injured 2020, and he missed the rest of the season after playing only 4 games. 2021, he lost the starting job. So, key component of Jonas Gray Players of the Week. Have you overcome something? Have you had a ridiculous thing happen to you? Not many guys get benched at Syracuse and go on to have NFL careers. I'm just going to put that out. There.
Fact.
So he entered the old transfer portal, Tim, and he went to the University of Illinois, where he won the starting job. Threw for 15 touchdowns, rushed for 6, 69% completion percentage in his final collegiate season with the Fighting Illini. Tim, shocking news, was not invited to the combine. I know that will stun you. Wasn't drafted. 14 quarterbacks taken in the 2023 draft. Tommy DeVito, not one, was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Giants and then was cut in final cuts, came back on the practice squad. Clearly would never have played a game this season if things had gone the way that they'd hoped. Danny Dimes gets injured. Tyrod Taylor gets injured. In comes Tommy DeVito, a 25-year-old rookie as well. Like, you don't see a lot of those in this day and age outside of service academy guys. So good for him. Or, Mormons, basically. So Tommy DeVito comes in, doesn't play great against the Jets, as we say. Then they got beat by the Raiders. They got beat by Dallas. It was a bit of a figure of fun kind of thing. But then 18 for 26, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Washington Commanders in the W4 Big Blue. Threw a couple of great passes in this game. This wasn't, check down Charlie. The touchdown pass to Saquon Barkley, the first one was a seed into the turkey hole, as I believe people refer to it in the goal, cover 2. Put it over the shoulder in the end zone. Appropriate for Thanksgiving, right? He also won this game, if we want to use QB wins. He got sacked 9 times in this game. The Giants had 0 rushing yards until the last play of the third quarter. And Tommy DeVito took him to the promised land. He's the first quarterback to win a regular season game with 9 sacks taken since 1992. Tim, any idea who the last one might have been?
No.
Famous sack taker. Also played in Philadelphia. Also played in Minnesota, as a matter of fact.
Oh, Jesus. No, I have no idea.
Ramblin' Randall Cunningham we were looking for.
Randy Cunningham. Okay.
So, yeah, Tommy DeVito putting in a great performance. Of all the out-of-nowhere things that we've had in the NFL this season, I think this is the most out-of-nowhere. He lives with his parents. His parents live closer to the Giants facility than apparently they did to his high school, which I quite liked. And he is driving the short jaunt to MetLife on the daily to get the reps in, to put in performances on Sunday. Tommy DeVito, winner of this week's Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week teaspoon. Congratulations to the Jersey boy. There you go.
Well, I think what we can say for sure, is that the Giants have found their quarterback of the next 15 years. Oh, wait. No, sorry. That's what we've been
Tom Brady never did it, Tim. Tom Brady never took 9 sacks and won a game.
No, well, there's that. All right. So, Luke, I got 2 quick hitters for you before we go home for the day. Put it on pause for the week. Let's hit 2 quick ones if you don't mind. The first, Brock Purdy had a perfect passer rating. A lot of it made about the perfect passer rating this weekend. Some people don't like the passer rating statistic as much. Some people swear by it. There are 2 quarterbacks. He played well. There are 2 quarterbacks in the history of the NFL who have had 4 games with perfect passer ratings. Do you know who they are?
I mean, no, but I'm going to guess. So they've had 4 games each of
4
perfect passer ratings.
Perfect passer rating.
First of all, fucking hell. How? That's really good. Wow. I'm going to go with, I'll start with a big hitter and see if this works. Because it'll either be like some random. Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning is 1.
Okay, good. I'm glad I got one right. The second, can you give me like an indicate? Is it like a name? Is it not a name? Like, can I get any kind of hint?
I mean, it's definitely a name.
It's not Russell Wilson, is it?
It is not Russell Wilson.
Okay.
We would not be having this conversation if it was.
Can you give me an era? 90s, 70s, 80s?
He has
60s?
retired within the last 10 years.
Drew Brees?
No.
Ben Roethlisberger.
Ben friggin'
Wow.
Roethlisberger.
Good for Ben.
Go. Yeah. So interestingly enough, Peyton Manning's 4. He was 18 of 23 for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns, 20 of 25 for 315 and 6 touchdowns, 20 of 2 of 26 for 377 and 5 touchdowns, and 16 of 20 for 268 and 3 touchdowns.
How many of those were with the Broncos? Because that sounds like when he had his crazy season.
That was all Colts.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. It was all Colts. One of them was against the Broncos, if that counts.
Nugget.
Ben Roethlisberger, not quite as prolific in his games. 9 of 11 for 218 and 2 touchdowns.
How does that get you a perfect passer rate?
Because it's
9 completions.
Because it's average yards per completion, completion percentage, touchdowns, and turnovers. Sorry. 13 of 16 for 209 and 5 touchdowns. 16 of 20 for 261 and 3 touchdowns, and 22 of 25 for 328 and 5 touchdowns. So not quite as prolific as Peyton's.
13 completions, 5 touchdowns will get the job done, I think.
It does. It does indeed. So the second thing, and this is more of your opinion. I'm seeking an opinion, no more trivia. Travis Kelce refused to give the Eagles credit for their road win over the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, stating, quote, "It was turnovers and penalties on our half. It's nothing that they did. It's all on us." He later went on to say they would have had 2 touchdowns if not for the 2 turnovers, which is, of course, to say, duh.
You did score 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's funny, the idea that he should somehow be required to pass on credit to the Eagles as if they're sitting around waiting for his approval. But what say you about Travis Kelce's refusal to give credit? And then what say you about the idea that, well, if we just not turned over the ball, we might have scored touchdowns?
Well, I think, first of all, his assertion that if they hadn't turned the ball over twice in the red zone, they would have won the game is probably an accurate summary.
Accurate, yep.
The second thing I'd say is, like, he's kind of right, but it's a bit churlish to just be like, they didn't do anything. I mean, watching the game, it certainly felt one-sided, and I was kind of amazed that it was a 3-point game when it was, and I was even more amazed when the Eagles took the lead because it had the feel of a very, very one-sided affair in the main. Eagles hung around. The Chiefs did completely shoot themselves in the foot on several occasions. Travis Kelce, among those responsible drops. They had receivers running the wrong routes. They had holding penalties at terrible times. The turnovers were inopportune, to say the absolute least, but it's been a trend. They have not scored second half points in any of the last 3 games. That's a trend. That's not a freak occurrence. We talked about Brock Purdy had 3 bad games. Doesn't mean he sucks. Doesn't mean the Chiefs suck. And this was, we talked about over text, I mean, as big of a sabotage job on a quarterback by a bunch of wide receivers as you will see in the NFL. It was a bit of a rash this week, right? Justin Herbert had the amazing throw to Quentin Johnston, which he dropped, which would have potentially put them in a position to win that game. You had Lamar, we talked about earlier in the season, where they had all the drop passes. This was egregious.
Probably would have been the podcast topic if it hadn't been earlier in the season.
Valdez-Scantling got fairly apportioned the blame for dropping an absolute dime basically in the end zone. That was a touchdown. The craziest one to me was the 4th and 25 play.
Yep, hit him right in the hands.
At the end of the game, which Mahomes threw a 25-yard hitch, which you just never, ever see on a line, and hit Justin Watson in the hands and he dropped it. And I was like, that just summed the whole thing up. So to summarize, he's kind of right because the Chiefs should have won that game. And it wasn't the turnovers and penalties. You could even include those. If they caught the ball, they would have won. But to win the game, you got to catch the ball. So
yeah, you also have to have better officiating because I tell you, very rarely do I get this mad about officiating on the game I'm not watching. But
yeah,
when they called a false start on Kansas City when Philadelphia came all the way across the line into the neutral zone, and apparently the Kansas City lineman didn't react quite quick enough.
Yeah,
that was abhorrently bad. It went from 3rd and 12 to 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 12. I mean, that's a big difference.
Yeah. It wasn't very well officiated. But yeah, you got to win the game by winning the game. You can't say we didn't win the game because we didn't win the game, and that's why we didn't win the game.
if we less turnovers, more touchdowns, win more often. Yes, agreed.
If my auntie had stones, she'd be my uncle.
And on that note, we're going to wrap it up here from the Half Yard Line. Really appreciate you guys checking in with us this week. Find us on YouTube, on the socials at Half Yard Line Pod. Gmail is halfyardlinepod@gmail.com. Our newly reactivated Threads, go check that out. If you don't know what Threads is, me neither. But, we're also on X, which used to be Twitter. We're also on Insta,
other stuff,
chat, stuff and TikTok.
On TikTok, yes.
Yeah. So check all those things out. But while you're doing that, we're going to be doing other stuff. So we will catch you next week. Be good.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.